Hi Como friends, this is brought to you by the Legacy Amendment, and it is a wonderful keeper talk on cane toads today. My name is Brooke. I am one of the keepers here at Como Zoo, and I'm really excited to bring over one of my favorite animals, again, is cane toads. So first off, we're actually going to start by just talking about some basic things between toads and frogs and the differences between the two. So toads tend to lay their eggs in long strands versus frogs lay them in clumps. Toads tend to not need as much water as frogs do, in the fact that they can kind of retain some of that water more easily and have that bumpy skin, versus frogs have that smooth skin that can easily dry out. Now toads, as my cane toad here, and you can see, does not have webbed feet either. It's not in the front nor the back, versus our frog friends do have the webbed feet in the back. Toads, of course, have chubbier legs and tend to be a little bit more plump, and so they cannot jump nearly as far as our frog friends can. Another common difference, and something that most people can point out easily, is just the color. Toads tend to be more brown or drab color looking, versus frogs come in obviously a wide array of colors and have that smooth skin. Now toads in particular are called, a group of toads in particular are called a knot, versus a group of frogs would be then called a army. And that's an often frequent question that I get. Now let's talk about our cane toads here now that we got over the differences. Again, this is a cane toad. His name is Chester. He's probably about 3 years old, which would be an adult. He's completely full grown. And what's neat with this individual is that the colors are really unique and different with that brown, and then they've got kind of that white patch on the back as well. This individual is a typical size for a male. These cane toads can get up to the size of a basketball, a small basketball. So I have this basketball here kind of as a demonstration here to see how large they do get. And they can get up to about 3 pounds. So that's a pretty big toad. Now what's really cool with these toads, and also problematic, is besides their size, is they were introduced, let's start over here. They're about 10 to 15 years old. So again, this toad is fairly young at 3 years old. And they're native to South and Central America. So now back to kind of what I was saying earlier, is that these guys are neat, again, being from South and Central America, but they were actually brought to Australia in 1935 to eat king grub. Now they brought about 100 of them into Australia, and unfortunately, they ended up not eating the cane grub at all. They ended up eating everything else in sight. So the whole purpose of getting rid of that cane grub was kind of depleted by that. In the U.S. here, we do have some cane toads as well. They were brought some in the 1930s, but mainly they came in the 1960s, and they actually were escaped at the airports. There was about 100 of them that had escaped. Now thinking that why is it a big deal that they're in the U.S. or that they're brought over to Australia from their native place is because these guys are really invasive. Some things definitely to point out is that they're very prolific breeders. Here in Minnesota we do have 2 species of toads. It would be the Canadian toad as well as an American toad. And they lay eggs about 4,000 to 8,000 eggs at a time every year. Versus our cane toad friend here would have about 8,000 to 25,000 eggs, which is a significant amount of eggs in comparison to our natives. Another interesting fact is that with that many eggs, they actually hatch and morph out much more quickly than our natives. So that gives them really a head start in life and to kind of start eating all sorts of prey. Something really fascinating with this guy, and all cane toads for that matter, is that they have something called a parotoid gland. Just a little squeamish. This is our first time on camera today. So here, right behind the eye, this big bump is called a parotoid gland, and it's located right behind the ear, or the tympanum. And in this gland is something called a bufotoxin. Now this bufotoxin is very, very toxic. Cane toads are the most toxic toad in the world, which I think makes them even better. But these toxins can actually affect your nervous system as well as your heart. So for a lot of animals that want to eat these invasive toads that look very tender and gushy to eat, they will actually end up dying because of the bufotoxin. So what ends up happening, if you were to take this toad and put it out in your yard or have some kind of stress to this animal, it will exude a bufotoxin. Again, it's out of these parotid glands, and it looks just like Elmer's glue. This toad in particular is a smaller cane toad, so the parotid glands can get much larger. As seen behind me, I do have some pictures of that. In the top left here, we have a large parotid gland, so that's much bigger. Here's the eye. So it's about 3 or 4 times the size of the eye, and that bufotoxin is then exuded from there. So because of that toxin, again, they have very, very few predators, because a lot of those animals do pass away if they're ingested. In their native land of South and Central America, there would be caimans, certain snakes, fish, and some eels that actually can eat them. But places like Australia and the US, there's very few animals that have that adaptation. A couple of them would be like saltwater crocodiles could eat these guys, wolf spiders, keelbacks, and red-bellied black snakes could eat these. So they've kind of developed a way to not have that toxin affect them. Taking some big breaths. And one thing that I just love about these guys, besides their wonderful size, is that their eyes. They have beautiful eyes with those gold flecks. And obviously, if you can see him closing them, that actually helps with food digestion as well. So I did bring some friends with us, or some snacks, I should perhaps say, for our cane toad. And we'll see, he's a little bit shy today, so we'll see if he'll eat those. He very well might not, but it's definitely worth a try. Now these guys are known for also eating ping pong balls if one rolls by their face. In Australia, I know a lot of people do enjoy them because they are friendly, and people start searching for them, so they form a bond with these animals quite easily. And one lady had said that she would actually put out cat biscuits for this animal. And so these guys would be eating dry cat food if they came across it. Now, because they were introduced in Australia and are now an invasive species there, again, like I said, there's about 100 individuals that were brought there in 1935, again, to eat the cane grub. And now, unfortunately, there's over 2 billion of them in Australia, which is a huge difference from that 100. And so the Australian government is really trying hard to eradicate them and kind of get them back, or at least in control of the population. So a lot of times they will net out the tadpoles in the spring after they've laid and hatched, and euthanize them that way. And they've also put about $2 million into population control just for these animals in particular. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and post them on the Facebook Live page, and I'm more than happy to answer them, and we can kind of go from there.
Here's a question, Brooke. How many years do they normally live?
That's a great question. So these guys are about 10 to 15 years in the wild, and probably even longer in captivity. A big part of that is really not much predators, as I briefly spoke about, and also great camouflage, and they can eat everything, so they do quite well.
I think you talked about this a little bit with the crickets and the ping pong ball, but anything else that they eat?
Oh, absolutely. These guys will eat anything. These crickets are actually kind of a little appetizer for Chester right now, but I used to have one as a pet in college, and we fed it a mouse every other week. So these guys do eat adult mice. They will eat fish. They will eat small birds. Pretty much anything that can fit into their mouth, they will eat. And again, this cane toad in particular is quite small, being that it is a male. The females, most of the time, will get much larger, being able to carry the male during amplexus or breeding season, and as well as carrying all those eggs that we spoke about earlier. Looks like the cane toad's getting a little nervous and is not going to eat the crickets, but that's all right. We did pretty good today. I really want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.